Hello, I'm Ashwin
Yeah.
Ahmad, and I'm here speaking to international columnist and based in London, Rashmee Roshan Lall, who is viewing the events, the dramatic events of Brexit, and the entry of Mr. Boris Johnson as the next Prime Minister. Well, Rashmi, very dramatic scenes. First of all, a big welcome to you. And very dramatic scenes we've seen. We saw huge posters outside the Conservative Party. We saw Boris go back. I think two ministers, you can correct me on this, resigned minutes before he took the podium. So I want to ask you, what is the mood? What is the mood like in the UK and certainly in the Conservative Party, which seems very divided at the moment?
Well, Ashwin, I think it's dramatic in the way of a very long-running play. So there is a sense of inevitability about it. From the day that the departing Prime Minister Theresa May said that she was going to step down and step aside as the leader of the Conservative Party, the governing Conservative Party, it has been no secret that Boris Johnson would stand as a candidate to replace her, and that he was the favorite among the 160,000, just under 160,000 Conservative Party members up and down the country, though no one was very clear if he would be able to get a vote of confidence or at least enough votes in the secret ballot that was conducted among the Conservative Party's 311 MPs. So there was always that question, but once he passed the parliamentary hurdle, then it didn't seem to be a secret at all that the Conservative Party membership would vote for Boris Johnson. So, in a sense, I'm sorry to have to sound as if I'm a bit of a wet blanket, but it's like the party's been going on so long that everyone's quite jaded. They knew it was going to happen. They all want to go home now and have a nice rest.
The interesting thing is that the criticism to Boris Johnson seems to be coming much more from his own party members than from the Labour Party. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, I think the criticism of Boris Johnson is across the board. That is one thing I would say. But you're absolutely right to pick on the fact that conservatives themselves, or members of the Conservative Party, prominent people in the Conservative Party, they are quite appalled at the fact that modern conservatism is going to be led by a man who has a very, let us say, a very infrequent relationship with the facts, with the truth, with any moral principles, with any particular idea of morality, and so on and so forth, things that one would say are small c conservative values. Now, I will say, just moving ahead a little bit, I will say that when Boris Johnson's election by roughly 68%, not roughly actually, it exactly was 68% of the Conservative Party membership was announced today, then what the tone that he took, the words that he used in his speech, which was a very short speech, were really the words of a centrist modern conservative, not a fire and fury breathing Brexit hardliner. Now, this may be just, as is with the case with much of Boris Johnson, things that he does, political theatrics. He'll do what he needs to at the moment and then forget about it, make a U-turn, and he doesn't care and everything goes on just as it is. But it was notable that he talked about conservative instincts over 200 years. And remember, this party was founded in 1834. So, it's had a pretty long time to adjust to the vagaries of power and the shifting sands of, public opinion. And he
Right.
talked about, I'm just going to take 1 minute to just tell you about how interesting it was that he talked about the competing instincts in the human heart, the instinct to own your own home, for example, and to have your own things, and the instincts to share. That's one. The second one he talked about was how Britain should be in alliances and in fraternal and close alliances, but also there is the instinct for democratic, was his word, democratic self-government. So that in itself suggested that A, he's talking about one nation conservatism and looking after the poorest and the neediest. That's one. And the second thing was he's not talking in terms of a war with the European Union. Now, we've got to see what happens, but it was interesting.
Mhm. It was interesting. It's sure to get even more interesting. Now I want to bring you to the question of Iran. Now I don't think he would have wanted the circumstances, but he has been thrown into what is uh, a foreign policy crisis that would test the best of people. And Boris Johnson hasn't been known for his diplomacy. I think we can all agree on that. Now, what do you think will happen? Because right, and Britain so far has been very careful with regards to Iran. They've not joined the US-led multilateral coalition. I think Jeremy Hunt has talked very loosely about a European maritime mission. Do you think with Boris Johnson we're going to see an end of that? Because he's been seen as very pro-US so far, and nothing has changed that.
But there have been, you're absolutely right to say, there are fears, and there have been fears in the run up to today, to the announcement of who was going to be the Conservative Party leader. There were fears that if it is Boris Johnson, and which it is now, that he will cause the United Kingdom to hew ever more closely to the American position and peel away from the Franco German uh, three-way alliance that Britain has formed in the days and the months after Donald Trump withdrew unilaterally from the 2015 JCPOA, loosely called the Iran Nuclear Agreement. Um, so there have been fears, and this would not sit very well with British opinion. Most British people feel, I mean, public opinion basically is against the idea of the United States just unilaterally withdrawing from an agreement that was signed, with Iran and six world powers. So it's just not fair. And Britain, whatever one says, does have some sense of, it does like to see international law upheld and international agreements should be upheld. So this will not sit very well with British public opinion. Now, it is possible that a Boris Johnson administration could abandon the French and the German. I somehow doubt it. I'm going to nail my colors to the mast for a minute. It's always an unwise position, particularly with all these imponderables at the moment. But I would doubt that Britain will say that we are going to join the maximum pressure tactics, because that would mean that once again it would be a repeat of what Tony Blair did with Iraq on the
Yes.
Iraq issue in 2003, taking Britain into a position of aggression, causing loss of life, considerable damage to Britain's own, position in the world and its credibility, really. And this sort of poodle-like behavior, I'm not sure is going to be appreciated by the British people. Now, this may be academic anyway, because it is entirely possible that the Iranians will let go the vessel, they will release the crew, things will go back to some level of normalcy. It's possible. So maybe we're just talking about academics, but somehow I do not think that a British Prime Minister would do that, particularly at this point of time. However, there are surprising things that can happen, as we all know.
Yes, with we don't know. So I want to ask you now, but then what are his options? This is not going to be perhaps the first time. It's not going to be the last, because Iran has said it's retaliating in terms of the British Iranian tanker that was seized. So the fact is that Britain can't guarantee the safety of all its oil tankers that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So, what are the options for the new prime minister and with regard to this?
Well, I found it quite interesting that almost within a half hour or an hour of Boris Johnson, the announcement that Boris Johnson had won the most votes and was going to be the leader of the Conservative Party and therefore the Prime Minister, Tobias Ellwood, who is currently the Defense Minister, immediately said, "Oh, who does not back, by the way, Johnson's position on a no-deal Brexit." He said, "Oh, I'm not going to resign from the cabinet, and I think everybody should support the new Prime Minister." So I mean, there will probably be a reshuffle, of course, and he will probably form his cabinet the way he wants to. But let's look at a scenario. Suppose that Jeremy Hunt, who was his rival for Prime Minister's job, if he is kept in the position of Foreign Secretary, and if Tobias Ellwood is kept in the position of Defense Minister, or even if they're reshuffled, or if there are people who are near lookalikes who are put in those positions, what have they been saying? They have basically been saying, Jeremy Hunt has been saying, we are going to obviously protect our own, vessels, and we will join in a European-led. That was the term he used.
Yes.
European-led maritime security operation, and it will continue until we
Mhm.
are sure that Iran is going to allow the passage of these vessels and so on and so forth. And Tobias Ellwood has been constantly saying, listen, let's not talk about extreme measures. We don't want a confrontation. So I don't really see Little Britain, and here I'm talking about geographically, I'm
Mhm.
not, and with a truncated navy and with a lot of problems, I don't really see Britain wanting to do anything about it in an aggressive way. I just don't think so.
But you kind of led me to my next question. With the dissent against him in the party, are we likely to see Boris reshuffling cabinet members, bringing in loyalists of his own? And if so, who are the people likely to be?
Well, I definitely think you will. I mean, that will be expected. And I think a very strong candidate for the cabinet will be Michael Fallon, who was
Hmm.
forced to resign um, in the early months, I think within the first year of Theresa May's prime ministerial tenure. So he's a very strong supporter of Boris Johnson's. I think he's going to reshuffle a lot of people around. Maybe Michael Gove would become chancellor. I think that is possible. Um, it is entirely possible that, as I said, I see very little purchase in moving Jeremy Hunt, who has sort of got his legs under the table really at the Foreign Office. But maybe he may feel that it is better given to someone else. Um, they're about, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is a very hardline
Yeah.
Brexiteer, is likely to come in, definitely, though the position is not specified. There will be, it is going to be the first time that the Brexiteers are going to be properly in charge. I think it's going to be, I think one thing that, one of the reasons why, I mean, people constantly describe Boris Johnson as exactly like Donald Trump. Perhaps they look at the blonde hair and the fact that he tells he's not very like Boy George Washington, the man, chap who could not tell a lie. Boris Johnson can tell lots of lies, or
Right.
or will elide over the facts because he finds them inconvenient. But I think it is a very important point to note about Boris Johnson, which is very different from Donald Trump, that when Boris Johnson was mayor of London, even though he committed all sorts of terrible, uh, there were howlers, there were mistakes, there were he wasted such a lot of money, and as a person who pays London rates, I feel appalled at the thought of it. But he has a talent for delegation. So what he did was, when he was doing all this, causing a lot of confusion, he got a good team together, left the heavy work, heavy lifting to them, and just got on with being Boris. So unlike Donald Trump. So I think that is going to be an important, he will probably pick. good people, though it is a diminishing, you know, front bench in a sense, or the number of people available. Yeah.
You mentioned something very interesting where you talked about people always talking about Boris as being Donald Trump and very hardline, but you also now mentioned that he's not that kind of person that people perceive. So I mean, what do you base that on? Because from outside, or in India, maybe we get incendiary headlines, but that's the impression we have here.
You know, I would just take you back to his speech right after he accepted, he acknowledged the fact that he had been voted the leader of his party. He thanked Theresa May. He spoke.
Mm,
Now, whether that is genuine or very insincere and so on and so forth, and we have Boris Johnson's former editor, Max Hastings, who was the editor of the Daily Telegraph, saying he's a gold-plated maniac and egomaniac and not a very nice man. He can be very nasty and all the rest of it. But he did speak in very sober and in a very good fashion about Theresa May and about some of her passions and her interests in, raising up people and so on and so forth. I don't think Donald Trump would ever have the charity to speak about anybody else. Now, I think, so that's number one, to speak about anyone else who is not related to him or in some way providing him some monetary benefit or a photo op.
right.
Number one. Number two, I think Boris Johnson doesn't really take himself very seriously. Donald Trump cannot bear for anyone to not take him seriously. He takes himself so seriously. I don't think
True.
Boris Johnson, I think he understands quite clearly that he's seen as a bit of a buffoon. He doesn't think he is, but I don't think he takes himself that seriously. So to that extent, those are two clear differences, quite apart from the fact that Boris Johnson can actually read and write. And I will tell you, his 2014 book, uh, what is it called? It's called One Man, the Churchill Factor, One Man in the Making of History. It's a very good book. It really is. And okay, he may be a pantomime caricature, some people say, of Churchill, but the book is a fine read. He's a good writer. He may take liberties with the truth, but he is a good writer. And he must have had to do all that research to bring it all in and write a fairly good biography of Churchill.
I,
So
I,
these are
yeah.
three factors.
I totally agree with you on the writing part. I mean, he is such an engaging writer. Perhaps I would say, one of the best in terms of entertaining you. You don't even feel
Yes,
you've read a piece.
yes,
But
yes.
I now want to come. He's made a very strong statement that we will leave with no deal by the 31st of August. Now, obviously, we all know the challenges. We've seen what Theresa May had to go through, 20 MPs, perhaps more. This man has already started with, I think, 3 MPs saying they would resign. 2 have resigned. So I don't know the count, but he's had five so far leaving him. He has the EU against him. He doesn't have parliament. I mean, what is he going to do? How is he going to manage this?
Well, it's again, so as I was pointing out to you at the start of the conversation, that the short speech that he used to not attack the European Union. Now that is
Mm.
interesting, and he's saying, we've got to reconcile as the Conservative Party in our 200 years. We're very good at it, reconciling these different, and he used this phrase, jostling set of instincts in the human heart. So interesting. That means he is talking here for the first time since really the campaign period before the June 23, 2016 referendum. He's talking for the first time about compromise. That's what he's
Right,
saying, reconciling. It is possible that he may not have the political room for maneuver, or it is
right.
possible that he may not have the vision or the greatness to actually put the country above party. And in fact, why should we expect that of him, since he's not been known to be a very principled person? He changes political positions. When he was mayor of London, he was supposed to be this great multicultural modern conservative who was, totally tied into the 21st century. And then he's sort of now spouting, he's been talking in ways that do not accord with that at all. So you're right to ask that how would he do it, and with the political arithmetic, parliamentary arithmetic against him, with Parliament as a whole unwilling for Britain to leave the European Union without an agreement that allows for no tariffs or tariffs, easy entry and exit of goods. How is it all going to happen? For my 2 cents, are really, I will just say that I think he's going to kick the can down the road. I think he's going to say, we will come to some agreement. He will talk to Michel Barnier, the EU negotiator. He will say that let us agree that we have left on the 31st of October, and all the deals will be done. All the details will be worked out in the next 3 years or 2 years or whatever, and we will not have left. That is what I think is going to happen, because there is not going to be, I do not think the British Parliament is going to stand by and allow Boris Johnson to pull Britain out of the European Union without a deal. That said, I have been wrong before. So, like most political journalists, no one wants to make predictions these days. But I don't think it's going to happen.
But you said you don't want to make predictions, but I will ask you, what do you think Britain will look like finally under Boris Johnson? And how do you see it being different from May? And
well, one thing I will say to you, that I don't really like having political entertainers as primary political leaders. But in the situation that we're in, I think it seems to cheer people up. What is happening in Ukraine, where you have a comedian became president and now has led his newly formed Servant of the People party to the first clear single party
yes,
majority in Parliament. The same sort of thing is happening, except we are doing it the other way here in Britain. We've got a politician who's become an entertainer. So, it's a reverse process. And so it's like a sort of an empire bites back kind of thing. It's a reverse process. It's bananas in a sense. I think he's going to infuse people in a way that Theresa May did not, because she was really rather weak and whinging and desperate, and did not even speak very well, was not very personable, was not able.
yeah.
But that said, at some point you've got to focus on the detail, and sunny optimism and Latin phrases and English words that are long lost to conversation, the Bertie Wooster phrases, are not going to really cut it. So I think we are going to still be here in Britain, we're going to be in a chaos, in a state of chaos, extended chaos, and very rapidly proceeding towards a general election. I absolutely think we're going to do that. And it is worth noting that all the polls put all 4 parties, and so that's the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, and the Brexit Party. All 4 are roughly at level pegging. So
you
there you go.
So you are banking on general elections, not a second referendum. And how soon do you think that will come?
Well, people say that it could be that under some scenarios, people say that it would actually be to the advantage of the Conservative Party if you have a general election before the Brexit pull-out date, which is the 31st of October, or Halloween. Unfortunately, the comparison, the imagery of Halloween is interlinked with that. so that they could just blame everything on the fact that the election has come round and it's all these MPs who forced them not to, actually pull Britain out. But some say that, why not do it, reap the rewards of actually having pulled Britain out, and then let, someone else win the election or at least win enough seats and, let someone else take care of the mess. It's very difficult to predict right now. I will say, though, that you should look at the August 1 election that is coming up in Brecon and Radnashire, and it is in mid Wales. And the Conservative Party is at about 20%, okay, public sentiment polling, and the Lib Dems are at 43. So they are the only pro-European party, and they're at 43. And bear in mind that Wales, along with England, voted to leave the European Union, and Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to stay. So that's a half-half split, a half and half split in the United Kingdom. So it's very interesting. The picture is very chaotic and in a flux. But I'm not sure how long this Boris Johnson prime ministerial period as prime minister will continue. It's very difficult to say. The arithmetic, as you have pointed out many times, is really not in his favor. And the challenges are immense. Though, in his inimitable style, he did say that he read in the Financial Times, oh, great British brand. I read today that, every such daunting challenges. And then he looked at the crowd and he says, are you daunted? You don't look remotely daunted. He just threw it all back and everybody laughed and I think felt a bit cheered. So there you have it. It's just a few laughs.
Rashmee, as always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for very candid views, and we'll be in touch with you soon.